Well, no president of the United States has been more influenced by movies than Donald Trump. Other presidents have appreciated movies, but never used them as their frame of reference for the world or for their work as president. Other presidents have befriended some of our greatest cinematic artists like Steven Spielberg and Spike Lee, but Donald Trump shows no capacity to admire anyone other than himself. Donald Trump is the only president in history who likes to talk about the way people look when he announces appointments to government positions in his cabinet or elsewhere in the government. You are guaranteed to hear the phrase central casting from Donald Trump when describing his very favorite choices for jobs. In the 1950s, when Donald Trump's juvenile brain was being permanently captured by movie imagery, central casting was often publicly referred to as the place to call to get an actor who really looked like a cowboy or looked like a cop or really looked like he could get through medical school and be a doctor. But I haven't actually heard anyone use the phrase central casting since I was a child. And when we hear Donald Trump tell us that his choice for a government job looks like he came straight from central casting, Donald Trump is indicating just how long ago his intellectual development was arrested. To Donald Trump, heroism is something defined by movies, not by real life. And so he thinks of heroism as nothing but movie tough guy heroism, a purely fake kind of invented heroism. That is why Donald Trump posts fake images of himself like this. No president has ever done more than Donald Trump to reveal himself to be a deeply cowardly man, and no president other than Donald Trump would ever dream of trying to create a courageous image of himself by turning himself into a fake movie character and publishing a deeply perverse photograph like that one that we just showed you. And so it is uniquely Donald Trump among American presidents who wants to be judged on his personal bravery and all-around tough guy toughness. And that is what makes Donald Trump's secret flight out of danger uniquely undermining to both his own self-image and what he wants his most fanatic supporters to believe about him. Donald Trump has asked the world to see him as a movie hero, the physically bravest president ever, when he is clearly the laziest president ever, who obviously spends more time in golf carts than he does thinking about governing, which obviously he never does. Donald Trump is the only president who has, in effect, asked to be compared to movie heroes. And so Peter Baker of the New York Times wisely turned to Andrew Marlowe, who wrote the screenplay for the 1997 giant box office hit Air Force One, starring Harrison Ford, as the bravest president ever imagined by Hollywood, who has to save everyone on Air Force One, including himself, after the plane has been hijacked. Spoiler alert, President Harrison Ford did the impossible and, of course, personally killed the hijackers. Up until last night, that's the way Donald Trump wanted his most fanatical followers to see him, as the Harrison Ford president who would personally kill anyone threatening Air Force One. Screenwriter Andrew Marlowe sees a problem for Donald Trump, the movie hero, in the way he chose to escape danger by boarding a secret flight out of Turkey while leaving Air Force One to take off as a decoy plane full of government officials and reporters who would have been the targets of the threats against that plane from Iran that the Secret Service responded to by secretly moving Donald Trump from Air Force One to another plane, using a catering cart truck to do that. Andrew Marlowe, the screenwriter who gave us Harrison Ford as the bravest president ever, told the New York Times, "Now, real life isn't a movie, but given the circumstances, I'm not sure I could ever script a moment like that for heroic main character," Mr. Marlowe said. If the threat were that great, it's hard to imagine an audience rooting for any character who would trade his own safety by treating the remaining civilians on board as potential sacrificial lambs, especially without their informed consent. And so Donald Trump sadly failed his own self-imposed test, the Hollywood hero test, the standard he pretends to achieve in his fake images of himself as a brave, gun-toting tough guy. Bill Clinton's press secretary, Joe Lockhart, explained to the New York Times the difference from the time Bill Clinton switched planes during a dangerous trip in and out of Pakistan. The Times reports when Mr. Clinton traveled to Pakistan, he too switched planes to avoid detection by possible attackers. He had been urged not to go to parts of the country which were havens for terrorist groups, but since he was already going to India, he felt compelled to stop in Islamabad for a few hours. The original security plan called for fooling the accompanying journalists into thinking that Mr. Clinton had boarded the same C-17 military jet that they were on, while he would secretly get onto a separate Air Force version of a Gulfstream known as a C-20. My vehement protest was, "You can't use the media as decoys," Joe Lockhart said. And they came back with a plan that satisfied me. They had Mr. Clinton walk around the nose of the C-17 to the other side, where 3 smaller unmarked planes were waiting. The journalists were not able to see which of the 3 he boarded, but they saw he had not gotten on the C-17. Unlike the Trump team in Ankara, the Clinton team informed at least one of the pool journalists in advance, Susan Page of USA Today, who recounted the episode on Tuesday. And the White House then publicly disclosed the details more broadly once Mr. Clinton was safely out of harm's way. Mr. Trump's team, by contrast, never disclosed what happened in Ankara until the Washington Post broke the story. As Donald Trump's presidency continues to collapse into chaos, every imaginary asset that Donald Trump was supposed to be bringing to the presidency in the minds of Trump voters is collapsing too. His tough guy image was already weakened by the people of Greenland standing up to Donald Trump's madman threats on Greenland. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is normally as mild-mannered as Canadian prime ministers usually are, has stood up boldly to the incoherent bullying from Donald Trump and shown the world what real governing toughness looks like and sounds like, including the fact that real toughness is not incompatible with consistent dignity and politeness. Donald Trump's phony image as the great negotiator has collapsed completely, even with Trump supporters, during Donald Trump's war with Iran, now in its 165th day. In a right-wing media interview today, when asked if he was changing his strategy in Iran, Donald Trump began his answer by saying, quote, "I don't talk about strategy," end quote. And then, of course, you know what happened. Of course he talked about strategy.
We have 2 very powerful strategies. We could just keep it alone, and they're going to fail. We could just keep, doing sort of just like nice and easy, relaxed. Like I said, I'm sort of negotiating. Do what I'm doing now, just bop along and look how bad they're doing. So economically, they are a mess. They can't borrow money. We control their money, what they had, which is a lot. They had a lot, and we have total control of it. I'm their banker. I am their banker.
I'm their banker. Imagine Joe Biden saying that. Imagine Barack Obama saying that. Imagine any other president saying, "I'm their banker." I am their banker, says the most lost man ever to live in the White House. In that same interview, the same president who last week insisted that the United States military was not running low on munitions today said the American military is running low on munitions, and it's Joe Biden's fault.
The reason it's low is because he gave $300 billion worth to Ukraine. He gave more. He gave,
Right.
They never mentioned that. They never like to mention that.
Last week, Donald Trump said the leakers who told the news media about his fight with Pete Hegseth about the reduction in American weapons of war should be sent to prison. He said the leakers of these treasonous statements are being hunted down. Long-term jail sentences will be sought, ! And then today, Donald Trump confirms some of those so-called treasonous statements about the munitions being depleted, American munitions. Everything Donald Trump has touched has turned to chaos. The reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. is now a poisoned puddle thanks to Donald Trump. He literally demolished 1/3 of the White House. And now a federal court has said that was a completely illegal act of the most extreme vandalism in the history of American government. And that court has blocked Donald Trump from building his ballroom where the White House East Wing used to be. Donald Trump has visited chaos on the world with his war in Iran, pushing up the price of oil worldwide, pushing up the price of gas and diesel fuel here in the United States, which, along with his illegal tariffs that now have to be refunded, have pushed up inflation in the United States. Donald Trump, the magical inflation fighter who promised to end inflation on his first day in the presidency, just end it, has increased inflation. Donald Trump, the great deal maker who promised to negotiate an end to Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine on the first day of this presidency, has negotiated nothing with Vladimir Putin, nothing. And so now Donald Trump engages in chaotic public negotiations with Iran on social media in which he issues threats, which he then forgets. He forgets his own threats, along with public lies like the Strait of Hormuz is open and the United States is in control of it.